Good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Blue Valley. That's what I ended up calling this one. I mixed up some turquoise and some orange. I'm going to compass in a sun circle and do a reflection in the what I suppose will be water that will be bright turquoise on top of where the darkest section is right now through here. So, orange, turquoise,
mail for which I
and then we'll go from there.
column. And if I don't find it, I can read it, and I'm not finding it, so that's okay. I'm not going to keep looking. So I did find it. How about that? So this is an article written by a woman just diagnosed with breast cancer. Remember, I said there's all kinds of research showing the relationship between breast cancer and emotional factors. She's just been diagnosed, and she wrote the article in the first person. The Globe and Mail's got a column written by people in the first person. And her doctor's name is Harold, and her husband's name is Hai. And she says, Harold tells me that Hai's first wife died of breast cancer. Now Donna, the second wife, is diagnosed with the same thing. Harold tells me that the lump is small and most assuredly not in my lymph nodes, unlike that of Hai's first wife, whose cancer had spread everywhere by the time they found it. You're not going to die, he reassures me. But I'm worried about Hai, I say. I won't have the strength to support him. Now what's wrong with this picture? She's the one diagnosed with a potentially fatal illness, no matter what the doctor says. And her first and automatic thought is, how will I look after my husband? She's the one who's going to have to go to radiation, maybe surgery, chemotherapy. How will I support my husband? So this automatic regard, compulsive concern with the emotional needs of others while ignoring your own, is a major risk factor for illness. And again, what I'm telling you here is, when I first noticed these things, I just thought I was seeing things. Turns out other doctors had seen it, had researched it, and found the same thing, just that nobody ever told me about that. The second, these are the other three I'll read you are obituaries, which are fascinating, because very often the people praise and the prematurely deceased is precisely what caused their death, but they don't realize it. So here's a doctor who, age 55, died of cancer in Toronto. Never for a day did he contemplate giving up the work he so loved at Toronto Sick Children's Hospital. He carried on with his duties throughout his year-long battle with cancer, stopping only a few days before he died. Now, if any of us got diagnosed with cancer, go back to work. Don't take any rest, don't look after yourself, nothing, just keep working until you drop. So this automatic and rigid concern with duty, role, and responsibility rather than the needs of the authentic self, that's another risk factor for illness. And I can certainly relate to that one. I talked to you about my workaholism. The third characteristic is illustrated by this obituary written by a grateful husband whose wife died of breast cancer, again at age 55. And the husband writes, in her entire life, she never got into a fight with anyone. The worst you could say was fooey or something else along those lines. She had no ego. She just blended in with the environment in an unassuming manner. Now I'm sure many of you here who are married, sometimes you wish that your partner would blend in with the environment in an unassuming manner. But not if they want to stay healthy, because what's being described here is the repression of healthy anger, and let me tell you, there's such a thing as healthy anger. It's a boundary defense. If I were to tread on your toes, you better get angry with me. Get out. This is my space. Get out. That's healthy anger. I'm not talking about rage. That's unhealthy anger. But healthy anger, we have a circuitry in our brain for anger. Nature gave it to us for a good reason. Anger is a boundary defense. What is the immune system? It's a boundary defense. Anger keeps out what you don't want. The immune system keeps out what's unhealthy. Because physiologically, we now know that the immune system, the emotional system, the nervous system, and the hormonal apparatus are not separate functions at all. They're one system. Physiologically, they're one system. So when you're pushed on one aspect of it, you're pushing down the other. When you're repressing your healthy anger, not expressing how you feel, you're also affecting your immune system, which can result in autoimmune disease or malignancy. Now, why do women get more autoimmune disease? In this society, well, let me read you one more obituary and then I'll come back to that question. So, in this case, you have to believe me, I didn't make this one up. This is from the Globe and Mail obituary section. And this is a doctor at age 72 who died of cancer in Ottawa. And the obituary said, Sidney and his mother had an incredibly special relationship, a bond that was apparent in all aspects of their lives until their death. Until her death, I'm sorry. As a married man with young children, Sidney made a point to have dinner with his parents every day as his wife Rosalind and their four kids waited for him at home. He would walk in, greeted by yet another dinner to eat and to enjoy. Never wanted to disappoint either woman in his life, Sidney kept having 2 dinners a day for years, until gradual weight gain began to raise suspicions. This guy suffered from 2 fatal beliefs. One, he's responsible for other people's feelings. You're not responsible for anybody feels. You're responsible for how you act and how you speak, but not for how they feel, unless you're a parent with small kids. Okay? And the second fatal belief was he was never disappoint anybody. Now, I'm not going to go into the science of it. There's a chapter on it in the book. I mean, I talk about it in the book when the body says no, myth and normal. But why do women get more autoimmune disease? And why do indigenous women get even more autoimmune disease? Indigenous people in Canada used to have no autoimmune disease at all prior to colonization. It's got nothing to do with genetics. It's got to do with stress and trauma. An indigenous woman today in Canada has 6 times the rate of rheumatoid arthritis than other people. If you're indigenous, your rate is 3 times as high. If you're a woman and indigenous, 6 times as high. Well, why? Suppression. And in this culture, which is the gender that's generally expected to be nice, not to be angry, to look after the emotional needs of others, ignoring their own, feel responsible for other people feel and not disappoint anybody. Women. That's why women are more prone to autoimmune disease. Which also means that healing, if you actually start knowing what you feel and getting connected to yourself and expressing it and saying no, you can actually do a lot of healing. I can give you lots of examples of that. The disease can actually teach you. And I've talked to many people who said that this disease is my greatest teacher. You all know the singer Sheryl Crow, I imagine. And Sheryl Crow said she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she said, surviving breast cancer redefined who I am and how I am. Until then, I'd spent a lifetime being a caretaker for everyone around me. From then, I started to put myself first. I used to have a voice in my head, at the back of my head, telling me that whatever I did wasn't good enough. Now finally, I've silenced those voices. So she allowed the disease to teach her. Why do people behave that way? Not deliberately. Here's the problem with us as human beings. Here's the problem. We think we're free. But many of the decisions and reactions and behaviors that we pursue are actually determined by what we're not conscious of or unconscious. And basically the unconscious pulls our strings. We're like puppets on a string. When I was a workaholic doctor, I was a puppet on a string. You gotta keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. So what happens? Children have two fundamental needs. Well, they have several fundamental needs. I'll say something about them in a minute. But they do have the need to be attached to. Attachment means our connection with somebody else. Why do infants have a need to attach? Because otherwise they die. So mammalian creatures, whether they're rats or horses or whales or elephants, wolves, they're wired to attach. Our brains are wired to love and to be loved, to be cared for. We have a circuitry for anger, we also have a circuitry for caring. Because without that, there's no mammalian life, especially not human life, because we're immature and dependent for much longer than other animals are. So that's one need we have, is for attachment, that connection. And that's a powerful need that we have all our lives, but it's never more imperative than in early childhood. But we have another need, authenticity. Auto, the self, being connected to our gut feelings, knowing what we feel, and being able to act on what we feel if necessary. Why is that necessary? We grew up, we evolved out there in nature until our species, Homo sapiens, has been on the earth for something like 200,000 years. A million years before that, there were other humanoid creatures. All that time, we lived out in nature until about 10, 15,000 years old. And for many people, until much more recently. How long, if you look at the indigenous people of this land, how long would they survive out in nature if they're not in touch with their gut feelings? So that connection to the self is essential. Terrific. But what happens if the child finds or gets the message that if you have authentic feelings, you're not acceptable to the parents? You don't do anger in this house. Now everybody says I quote him out of context. I'm not quoting him out of context. Jordan Peterson, the Canadian psychologist, writes in his book, 12 Rules for Life, that an angry child should be made to sit by themselves till they come back to normal. Anger is not normal, you see, in a 2-year-old. I'm telling you, if you're the parent of a 2-year-old, if you don't make them angry, you're not doing your job. Because they want to crawl out into the winter with no clothes on. No, you don't. It's not a democracy. You don't get to vote on that. They want to cook you before dinner. No, you don't. So what do you do when you get frustrated? If you're like me, you might throw a tantrum. So does the 2-year-old. But then you can't be with him. Another child has, more commonly, if the parents are stressed, the child picks up on that. Like I told you before, the child will suppress themselves not to add to the parents' stress. Will even take responsibility for the parents' stress. So they push them their own needs and their own feelings. So now there's a choice the child has to make. The child has to make, not a conscious choice. This is not deliberate.